Corpse Explosion is absolutely a garbage tier skill, right? Like, no one would ever invest in and try to build out a high tier Corpse Explosion Necromancer. That would be crazy. Like, I wouldn't go out and buy a 4GA Perfect Roll Black River and really try to test my biases here and figure out whether or not Corpse Explosion's a legit build, right? Roll the gameplay footage. We should probably talk about this skill. I'm actually a lot more impressed with this skill and what you can do with it outside of the pit, inside of the pit, and a bunch of different content. In fact, let's swap over to Infernal Hordes here, because it turns out that any build that can do above a pit tier 90 will just smash all other content in the game. So what you're currently looking at is a setup where I didn't even change anything to be better at speed farming or better at applying my damage in this Infernal Horde. And I'll just go ahead and cut to the quick here. I end up getting an 800 Aether run. But if I think a solo Corpse Explosion Necromancer, not built for speed farming and not changing out anything, can do this without even getting Hellborn, I think it's probably a decent enough build. Now let's jump over to a Helltide. I forgot just how easy it is to kill monsters, even in Torment 4, in the open world. Half of what's killing them right here is actually Affliction and a little bit of the damage over time from Corpse Explosion. And actually the Sever that I'm shooting out to create corpses is killing some monsters too. The cool part about this build is very similar to Minions. You can basically just sit at the Blood Maiden holding down Corpse Explosion and everything will die around you, because monsters are made out of wet toilet paper out in the open world. And if you have decent enough gear, you could do this. Hell, if you want to be even lazier, you could just throw on a Ring of Sacrilegious Soul and literally not do anything. But popping back into the pit, what do I think this build can realistically accomplish? Well, on the gear that I have right now, which while it's definitely impressive in comparison to some of my other builds, is far from perfect, I think the build probably tops out somewhere around pit tier 95. I'm doing a pit tier 90 here with 5 minutes remaining, and we don't even really slow down against the boss because I finally found a way to make it good enough to be able to generate corpses at a high enough rate to even be good on single targets. And just jumping back to me here really quickly, if you appreciate me just straight up telling you out loud what the build is and is not good at, if you appreciate that honesty, consider subscribing to the channel. I'd love to have you here. We're trying to hit 100,000 before the end of the year, and you don't want to miss out on any videos like this. Similarly, leave a like on the video if you enjoy it and you enjoy the editing and time that went into it, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions as they come up through the video. You'll be surprised how many of them I end up answering in this video. You can also jump around to the timestamps. Back to the gameplay footage, back to the explanation. But sincerely, the build is doing a lot better than I thought it was going to, and because it's such a non-meta build, all of the gear that you would want for it is incredibly cheap if you're somebody who does trade, and even if you're not, getting a decent set of unique items here and a ton of decent enough legendary items, and you yourself can build this out. If you built into it, you will be rewarded for doing that. It probably has the coolest aesthetic that the Necromancer can have, with the Howl from Below gloves, turning your Corpse Explosions into screaming skeletons that are running off. But now that I've hopefully gassed you up as much as I can, let's go ahead and talk about the build. We'll go over the gear, the Paragon, the stats, and all of that. It's going to be linked down below in a planner. So if you don't want to listen to me yap about those particular things, feel free to just click that. But I will say you're going to miss out on super important information for how the build will function and the things you need to understand about it. So if I can get just a little bit more of your patience, I promise I'll make it worth your while. And to be considerate of your time, let's immediately jump into the mechanics so you can have that information available to you and to better understand how everything is kind of working together. This is all centered around Black River. Black River says a lot of things. You can get up to 100% chance for Corpse Explosion to deal double damage. It will give you ranks to Corpse skills, increasing your base damage. It will give you ranks to Hewed Flesh. The most important part of this build is the ability to generate corpses, with Hewed Flesh being the way that we generate the majority of the ones that we use. You have a 32% chance to be able to trigger this. Your Corpse Explosion can trigger this on every time that it deals damage, although the actual lucky hit chance of Corpse Explosion is divided over its total length here. So it's actually 53 divided by 12. That's why Corpse Explosion itself doesn't really go infinite. So we need to use other tools to be able to make this happen more often. Now, luckily, Hewed Flesh does have double its total bonus when you're attacking a boss or a single target scenario, which is definitely where we have the biggest issue, being able to keep the train rolling. And then it has this big old aspect down here. What this says is that if you eat a single corpse, it doesn't do anything. But for every additional corpse you eat, so 2, 3, 4, or 5, you're going to increase the amount of damage that Corpse Explosion does, because it eats them all up and does 1 big corpse explosion. It's going to do more damage. It's not going to have more lucky hit chance. It's not going to have more duration. And the increased radius for the explosion actually doesn't work with the shadow dot version of the skill, which is what we're using, because it's the only way to sustainably generate corpses and the only way to add enough damage multipliers to corpse explosion to make it relevant. All from below is going to help making all of this a little bit more effective. So not only does it give corpse skill ranks, corpse attack speed, which is really nice to be able to cast corpse explosion as fast as possible. You wish it didn't apply fear and slow, but like, what can you do? And it has a huge amount of lucky hit chance. But the actual effect of it is going to make it so that when you were to generate a corpse, that corpse explosion will track down an enemy. So rather than just kind of staying pulled over here, it will run to the boss, it will run to the monster, making it just a lot more efficient and making it so that you don't miss corpse explosion as often. It's also going to apply the summon tag. Now, people play around with a lot of different ways of making the summon tag relevant. They try Unyielding Commander, they try Hellbent Commander, which are the only two things that will actually increase its damage. Except for, in this season right now, a secret Herodric Jewel. This is the Reverie Horn. It says that if you were to kill or injure an enemy, your summons are empowered and they deal more damage. This works for the corpse explosion since the missiles are considered summons. So that's how we're actually sneaking out a little bit more damage on this build than I was previously if you watched this on the live stream. So the question becomes, how do you generate corpses against a single target? Well, that is actually served in the skill Sever, in a very specific modifier of Sever available in the skill tree. This now says that whenever you cast Sever, it's going to deal more damage per minion. That doesn't matter, but it's going to leave a corpse at the endpoint. So where it travels to, it will leave a corpse. So when I cast Sever here, you're going to see a corpse is going to be left right there. So bare minimum, I can already cast Corpse Explosion, but it's actually a lot more valuable than that. Because unlike Corpse Explosion's really low lucky hit chance, Sever actually has a really high lucky hit chance, and this is not divided over anything. Every time Sever would deal damage to a target, it has 84% chance to be able to trigger this 32% chance, or against a single target like a boss, a 64% chance. So what that ends up being is about 80% of about 60%, which is just about a 48% chance. So half of the time it will trigger. And that's every time that Sever deals damage. So Sever not only deals damage when it hits a target, but also deals damage when it travels through a target and when it comes back to you. So you'll see here that it will come to the end, swing, shoot back, and then swing again. All four of these can hit a boss if you're standing close enough, meaning all four of them has a 50% chance of being able to trigger a corpse, as well as leaving a corpse behind. If you were lucky and you rolled head 4 times, you could actually generate 4 corpses every time that you cast Sever. Now add on the overlapping of your Soul Rift being up, the actual corpse explosions themselves being up, your corpse tendrils, and then also the blight in the pools that they leave behind, and all of a sudden we can generate enough corpses, even against a single target, to keep corpse explosions damage at a pretty high efficiency. And then all we need to do is find ways to further empower the skill to give it more multipliers, as well as activating things in our Paragon board. And since we are a shadow dot, we actually gain access to a ton of additional glyphs for more damage scaling, a really powerful Paragon board, and just some of the best aspects in the game for the Necromancer. So let's very quickly talk about the gear, because again, this is all available down in the description below, but just for people who like to see it in the video, I'm currently using Air Perdition as a huge amount of lucky hit chance. Technically speaking, the way that we're playing this build, you would be casting Sever and Blight often enough to make Crown of Lucian a larger damage multiplier, and if you were to use that instead, it wouldn't be a bad move. Crowd of False Death is obviously absolutely insane. You would like the GA to be on all stats and maximum life. I have maximum life and resource gen. The stealth damage and all of that doesn't matter. I see people ask about that all the time. We're not rogues, we're not in stealth, but we are going to be using Igni Thule. Igni Thule says that we're going to cast the Mystical Frost Nova from the Sorceress. This has a couple of benefits. It applies Vulnerable, which is really good on this build because we don't have 100% uptime. It's going to apply a freeze, which is really good for staggering bosses, since a lot of our damage is to crowd control targets. And then it also actually applies a 15% damage multiplier to a target hit by it. If you were to go read the skill in the Sorceress skill tree, you'd be able to see that. So this thing is absolutely nutty. Obviously, Howl from Below, the only 2 important stats on there that really matter are going to be Corpse Explosion and the lucky hit chance. Obviously, you want the aspect to be as high as possible. Now, since we're not a crit build, we're not going to be using Blood Moon Breaches. You could be using Tibalt's Will, which say when you're unstoppable, you gain a damage multiplier, but I found that these pants help to answer a lot of problems that the build have. One, hitting armor and res cap, since we're not going to be using right here. 2, adding on even more intelligence for damage scaling, more maximum life for survivability. You can add on a corpse explosion size temper, which does increase the size that corpse explosion actually sits at when you were to explode it. Black River doesn't work. This does work. So this helps to keep more monsters within the damage area than you normally would be able to reach. Then here's where we're going to put on Embalmer. Embalmer says when we eat a corpse, we'll generate a blood orb. What this means is that we can benefit from blood begets blood in our Paragon board. And also just picking up blood orbs every once in a while to be able to heal is so much faster than your potions. So you basically never have to click them. The second rune word is going to be Ahu Cax. This is going to serve 2 different purposes. 1, just a huge damage multiplier every other second or so, since we have so many overlapping lucky hit chance effects. But the consumption of essence here actually triggers Ring of Starless Skies. So unlike having to constantly weave in a Sever cast to be able to maintain this will actually just trigger for itself on large packs of enemies. So you can just sit there and prioritize casting Corpse Explosion as much as possible. For the boots, you can fit on Armor and Intelligence here to be able to hit your cap and increase your damage, and also Corpse skills for even more base damage. You want to put Corpse Tendrils here for the size. Being able to pull in as many enemies as possible is super, super valuable. And you would want this to actually be triple masterwork crit if you could really manage it. This is where we're going to fit on Cursed Aura, so we don't have to cast the curses ourselves. It's going to help a lot with speed farming as well, since this will automatically trigger the Affliction key passive. Black River is insane, obviously. You need 100% chance for Corpse Explosion to deal double damage, and then you would actually want the other masterwork crits to go onto Hewed Flesh. You might think Corpse skills, Fueled by Death, more damage. Why wouldn't you want that? At the ranks that we have these things, these are very minimal increases in damage, but being able to generate corpses more often is a huge overall multiplier of our efficiency. This has got to be one of the nastiest amulets I've ever rolled ever. GA on Gloom, Coalesce Blood, Intelligence. We got the right tempers, which are going to be ultimate cooldown and corrupting damage. And then here's where you're going to be putting Damned. Damned says that when you curse an enemy, they take increased shadow damage. We do shadow damage. It's incredibly powerful. We're also going to put Scornful Light in for the Roderick Jewel. For your second ring, you can basically have 2 of these. If you don't have a Ring of Starless Skies, do not worry about that. It's just nice to have. But you could have 2 of these on. You want Intelligence, attack speed, and lucky hit chance. I do feel that I need a little bit more maximum life than what I currently have, so I have one of these rolls on this ring. You would want more ultimate cooldown, more corrupting damage. Then here's where we're putting Great Feast. Here's where we're going to be putting Idle from Below, more core stat, more maximum life, and unhindered, which is really nice. Also, the Jewel Guardians showing up, especially in the pit boss section 2 minutes into the fight, is a great way to be able to generate even more corpses, since all of your lucky hit chance can trigger on as many targets as possible. So once they spawn on a boss, even if that boss doesn't normally generate adds, you get a huge damage increase. We're currently using Ring of Starless Skies for 2 reasons. The first reason being that the increased attack speed is actually really, really nice for being able to cast Sever faster. And not only that, it has a huge amount of lucky hit chance, but the damage multiplier here is actually very slightly better than on average the aspect of Creeping Death, which is the typical go-to for dot builds. My issue with Creeping Death is it doesn't really work on a boss because it only applies when they're staggered, and the boss ends up not being staggered altogether that often. You're either killing the boss too quickly for a 2 stagger, or you're fighting the boss for so long that the length of time that they're staggered is inconsequential. So it basically means that while you get a huge amount of damage while clearing out packs, you don't get a ton against the boss at all. And this is just a much happier middle ground. But if you don't have Ring of Starless Skies, put on a legendary ring with the same stats here and put on Creeping Death. It's not that bad. And then we are going to be looking for an offhand. You need at least 1 lucky hit chance to be able to restore a resource so that we can refill our resource for the Cax rune. Increased intelligence, maximum life, or lucky hit chance here is really nice. And more corrupting damage, and then Titan's Fall. Titan's Fall is what you would be looking for to masterwork crit on. Then you'll notice that I'm using Vehement Brawler. I'm not going to bore you to death with the entirety of the skill tree. I'm just going to call out the things that are important. You do want Acolyte's Reap to be able to generate a corpse. You want to max out Hewed Flesh. Blight is just for the damage multiplier. Sever, being able to generate corpses, is to work against single targets. Obviously, we're going with Blighted Corpse Explosion here. Fueled by Death is a really good multi. You may want a couple additional points into Grim Harvest than what I currently have, because generating essence from this helps with better uptime on the multiplier from Cax. If you need armor, you would put some points into Spiked Armor. Obviously, Abhorrent Decrepify to be able to reduce our cooldowns. For Corpse Tendrils, we actually don't need to generate Blood Orbs here because Embalmer's aspect will work for us. If you're not using the Legendary Pants I recommend, you would need the points here to be able to generate them, but you'll have significantly lower uptime on that multi. Coalesce Bud works for everything. Reaper's Pursuit, and then Gloom as well as Terror. Obviously, Soul Rift, and then Affliction. You may be asking, why not Shadow Blight on this Shadow build? The best version of a Corpse Explosion build right now is Shadow Blight. Shadow Blight's insane. Barbarian. It's our second strongest pit pushing build and is actually being held back by a really huge bug. But that's the issue. I wanted to make a corpse explosion build, not a Shadow Blight is the thing doing all the damage build. If you want to do that, there's a million different ways of doing it. But for corpse explosion, to actually scale its damage and have it be relevant, Affliction is significantly stronger. For the Paragon, again, I'm not going to bore you to death. In the main board, I'm putting Abyssal Glyph, huge multiplier for non-physical damage. Wither, legendary node here, is a massive, massive multiplier of damage over time. Then you're putting Sacrificial into this board for a huge amount of additive damage. Building over into Flesh Eater, you're going to want to pick up Eliminator for a huge amount of intelligence. Eventually, you do want to build down to Stifle. I just don't have the points right now. Over into Blood Begets Blood, this is where you get a huge amount of your survivability, but this is where we're putting Scourge. This is a 95 intelligence board. And then lastly, building over into Finality, we're going to be putting Amplify. Amplify ends up being better than Exploit, and actually generates more vulnerable additive damage than Exploit does, which I think is kind of ridiculous. So how do I feel about the build overall in Corpse Explosion as the primary package of this build? I don't hate it. I legitimately don't. It's performing at a much higher rate, at a much higher quality than I would have expected it to. And it really just comes down to just like how pit-pilled I am at this point. So much of what people ask me about builds and what builds are good and whether or not they're going to have a good time really comes down to being able to do everything. People want to be able to do everything all the time at maximum efficiency. So when you ask me about Corpse Explosion, I have to honestly tell you, no, it's not a good build. Because the difference of doing a pit tier 95 and what even Minions is able to do right now, which is pit tier 109, is something that I think a lot of people don't have a great grasp on, so let me just show you the math. Between pit tiers 95 and 100, the scaling is 20% damage. So to be able to do the same pit tier in the same amount of time, one tier higher, you have to increase your damage by 20. So that means that for 5 pit tiers, to increase it 5 times in a row, the build now needs to be doing 248% of its previous damage. And then to go from pit tier 100 up to pit tier 109, this is actually going to be a 28% increase in damage per pit tier, so nearly 30% more damage per each one. And that means that the build needs to be doing 23 times the amount of damage that you're currently doing. That is 2,300% more damage than what it's currently doing. And this build does not have another 2,300% increased damage to find. I did pit tier 90. I had over 5 minutes left on it, so I can get up to pit tier 95. Better gear, better masterworking, we could get there. But you're not going to come anywhere near this number. But that doesn't mean that the build is bad. If you could do pit tier 55, literally just walking into torment level, everything that you're fighting in that torment level is at that level. So the moment that you could do like pit tier 80, you can crush all content. It's not even funny just how quickly things melt. So once you realize that, like once I step away from trying to protect people from having a bad experience with the build, I'm able to get a better handle on whether or not a build is functional in a way where most people would call it viable. And I think that you would absolutely call this viable. Pit tier 95 on this build, even though it has a high gear investment, but really it's a bunch of gear that nobody wants, so it's super cheap on the trade market or easy to go farm, it is good. Like that's a high B tier build. And it's perfectly fine for above average builds to be called above average builds. Now, I don't think that Corpse Explosion is perfect. I think that having to do all these weird things, just be able to cast your skill and then not having a massive payoff like things like Blood Wave or even Bone Spirit nowadays is not good enough. I don't think that the skill is supported enough. They nerfed this thing into oblivion back in season 3, both the damage and the lucky hit chance. And I really wish that they would just reverse those changes and see what the skill does. We have not had a relevant Corpse Explosion build for 6 seasons. That is nearly 18 months. That's insane when you think about it. It would just be really nice for them to further explore it as we get closer and closer to the expansion. But the build's fine. The build's fun even. Corpse Explosion has always been super satisfying. Big explosions are satisfying. Howl from Below is one of the funniest uniques that we have. So I feel comfortable educating y'all on how to have a good time on this build because a lot of people ask for it, and I want to be serving builds even if they're not the most meta options out there, because not everybody cares about the meta. A lot of people care about just having fun. So here you go. I hope that this helped you out. Again, if you liked the video, if you felt like you learned something, subscribe to the channel. You don't want to miss out on any of this as I continue to roll out videos. And it would really help me out a ton. Thank you so much to everybody who has over the past couple of weeks. We've gained like 1,500 new subscribers in the past week or two. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below. Did I answer the question that you came up across as you were watching the beginning of the video? Did you have any other questions, comments, concerns, ideas, run into weird bugs, come up with interesting interactions, anything? I try to answer as many of them as I possibly can, so I'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching this video. I truly, truly hope that it helps. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.